Tarra Samuelson, welcome to the Map It Forward podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You, I have to say, are one of the big surprises of all my coaching work in 2021.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. There's people that you meet in the coffee industry that beautifully surprise the shit out of you, and you are one of those people for me. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you. It's quite a compliment.
Tell us who Tarra is.
Yeah, definitely. I'll begin with where I'm at and a little bit of kind of some background from there. I'm Tara. I right now live in Phoenix, Arizona, but I'm originally from Southern California. Grew up partially in Los Angeles, partially in a small town called Claremont, which was a wonderful place to have grown up. Did a little stint in UC Santa Cruz for a bit, came on home, and I've been for the most part back in Los Angeles for the past 10 years, except for these last 6 to 8 months being in Phoenix. I identify as Latinx. I'm very proud of that. I also love the city of LA, which many people don't. I'm also coming to love Phoenix. There's some great cool stuff about that too. I'm very into Tiki culture. If you want to know a little bit about that, I just love going to Tiki bars. Yeah,
okay, cool.
yeah. There's some really interesting background to it, and so
we have to talk about that.
We're going to have to. I'm like a novice ceramicist, constantly picking it up and stopping it. And eventually I'll pick back up and master it. But that's a whole other story. And
I'm so going to hate this conversation.
Yeah. It's a lot of random things.
I love you, Tarra.
Thank you.
Funny, because I met... Have you heard of the United States of Tarra, the show?
Yes, I have. And actually, Toni Collette is one of my favorite actresses. She's amazing.
I know the person who I had on my other podcast, the person who that show is based off.
That's interesting. Okay, right, wow.
Yeah. And so you right now are reminding me of her, of them. Sorry.
So the multiple states of,
Tarra.
Yep. Yeah, it depends on what side you want to know. There's the more home life that I have. I also like cooking. I'd be lying if I said I also enjoy cleaning. I like organizing. I like gardening. There's that, and then there's the other side of
structure.
Yeah. So you gotta have multifaceted. You can't be all one. I feel like many other people in the world will identify by who they are and what they enjoy much more before they start with their job.
Oh, word.
And I'd love to start that. So that's why I know in the long run we're going to talk about coffee. That's going to occupy the majority of our conversation.
At some point, I guess.
Yeah. So I figured we'd start with something different. I'd sprinkle little bits of other things.
Oh, how I love thee. Talk to me about Tiki.
Oh, yeah. No. So in my previous job, I used to travel all the time by myself. And so I wanted to take advantage of seeing a city. And I just started looking into Tiki bars because there was always one around. One around. And I felt like, okay, I'm a single woman going to these places. I don't want to go to a dive bar. I don't want to go to some fancy bar. But awesome. I want to go to a place where I can have a good experience. And with not
massive amounts of alcohol.
Yes, this is true. But I will admit, I'll just do one. I'll be there for a couple hours, hang out at the bar, call it a day. It's already dark there, and it was just a good place for me to congregate. And that's so it's awesome. Whenever I went to cities, I would just very evidently look for a tiki bar, and so it was great. I'd have one. I'd look for it. I'd learn about what they did differently. And it's, some people are like, it's a lifestyle. I'm not on the full lifestyle part of it, but I do like to collect mugs.
I've had some amazing,
yes, I do have a Tiki mug collection. I do. It's a compilation of both where I've been, and I've also had some wonderful friends send me theirs or gift me some from some really cool places. And it's just a great place, like a way to remember a really cool incident, because it's never just a bar. A tiki bar is never just a bar. You're never going to get usually the same things. So that's why I started getting into them. And
I have a question about that. What makes, other than the mugs, and I got to preface this, I don't drink alcohol, so I don't know the lifestyle. So I'm learning so much right now. So with regards to tiki bars, other than the mugs, what makes a tiki bar a tiki bar?
That's a great question. I think many people would argue it could be two things. One is quote unquote like the decoration or the atmosphere, right? And tiki bars, to my understanding, not a historian, but from what I have collected or understood, they really picked up in more or less like World War II when you could not go to Hawaii, right? Oh. Because of the war, what was going on. So people wanted to kind of go to these places that like really had these different kind of, like get away.
Okay.
So one of it is the decorations. I don't think that's all of it. There's a big concept of the idea of like classic tiki drinks, and then everything after that is a proto tiki drink. So you kind of have the classic drinks like Zombie, what else? The Navy Grog, a few other ones that are like, these were developed kind of in that like 40s to 60s range by very particular people, the Mai Tai, things like that. Mm-hmm. So typically to be considered, I think many times a tiki bar is you have to have some of those classic drinks on the menu.
Okay.
And then there's this whole internal debate of, can you consider things that are still tiki-esque to be a tiki drink if they're not one of those drinks? And some people are saying like, no, those are proto tiki. They have to be one of these classic beverages to be considered tiki. Yeah, and it's like, you're the original or you're not. And so it's I'm not enough in the debate of it, but I definitely watch it and kind of see. Definitely.
There's a vibe.
Yeah. I've had the luxury of going to some famous ones and kind of learning a little bit more about that from them. So it's been cool.
I feel like I got to go find a tiki bar here in Sydney now, see if they do like a virgin version of what they do, and just have the experience. Can you have virgin tiki bar drinks?
That I'd have to refer to the true enthusiast on that one of like who. Yeah.
Well, because our city's open. I don't mean to brag. And I'm not bragging because even though it's open, I don't know how to be in it right now. But I may have to take on board your way of exploring a city and just go to a tiki bar here in Sydney and see what's down.
Yeah, people are always in a good mood when they're there. I'll tell you that. Like, there's not many like sad drinking people at tiki bars. You're usually there for a good experience, and I appreciate that.
I'm always appreciative of that. Okay, I want to talk about what fascinated me about you when I met you. So you're a part of one of our mastermind groups, and you're one of the few people who legitimately surprised me how much I'm choosing my words very carefully, only because first of all, I want to preface this by saying I'm not trying to offend anyone ever when I talk about anything. So for anyone that's listening that gets their feelings hurt by anything that I'm saying, please know, like, Tarra, you know me from our groups. Am I ever trying to offend anyone?
No, I don't get that vibe at all.
I talk straight, but it's never with the intention of offending anyone. So when I say what I'm about to say, anybody who's listening, please don't feel offended. Tarra, you're one of the very few people that has done what they say they've done, and you've done it well.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. What I mean by that is, in order to, have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger Effect?
I have not, no.
The Dunning-Kruger Effect is where people who are underqualified feel that they have enough clout to teach everybody everything about what they've done. So, someone who's been in coffee for 6 months seems that they have the expertise to teach many, many people about everything about coffee. And people who are highly trained feel that they're not knowledgeable enough to teach people about coffee.
Yeah.
Do you know an industry where that might exist?
A little one. Yeah.
We have a lot of the Dunning-Kruger effect in the coffee industry. And so I'm always on the lookout for somebody who has a lot of knowledge and knows that they have a good chance of being able to use their expertise to help other people reach success. I find that an incredibly admirable quality in people, because we have too many people that I hope aspire to be like that one day, but usually their belief in themselves is there a little too early, and therefore it causes a little more damage to the people that they're advising, because once they become a coffee consultant and they're unable to point out the blind spots that they haven't yet seen because of their own lack of experience to their clients, everybody ends up in trouble. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So when I meet people like you who have done so much in coffee and built such a great repertoire, it's exciting to me when people like you are thinking of like, hey, like I think that I could build a career one day as a consultant in the coffee industry. And I'm like, yes, you can. And yes, you should. And so I don't meet people like you very often. And so, like I said, to anyone that's listening who thinks I'm an asshole because I said that, please know that I'm not sitting here trying to offend anyone. What I'm trying to say is, as an industry, we could get to a place where we do, and I think we will. I really am hopeful and confident that we will, if we recognize that the Dunning-Kruger effect really is quite prevalent in our industry. I think that it could be great if we start to say, hey, maybe I should wait a few more years and get a little bit more experience before I start to advise other people in what they should be doing in their careers as a consultant in coffee. So you've worked in a lot of different positions in coffee. What are they?
Definitely. I mean, I've started all from the ground up. So first job in coffee was simply being a cashier, running the register. So I did that, worked my way up to barista, shift lead. Then I went on to go do a little bit of the management. And then after that, I jumped into account management, training, did some sales. And then at some point I did sales, area management, and at some point national account management. That was really neat. And I'm now finally in a more director role, to doing director of wholesale. But this is, of course, over the span of 10 years. Right. It'll be 11 years. Yeah. Like in June. So it's been a long time. And having done both retail, but also probably majority of my career so far has been in wholesale. It's been great to be exposed to so many different parts of coffee, of specialty coffee. You know what I mean? And now I'm even getting a little bit involved in marketing, learning a little bit about green buying. It's cool. It's really neat. It's exciting to just see so many different prongs. And I'm not here to be like a Jack or Jane of all trades. I'm here to, more master in what I really want to be great at. But it's so great that I can learn a little bit about what so many other people do in different facets of coffee companies.
What do you think is the biggest, what's the right word? Not tool, but what's the asset in you that has been most helpful to you in forging your career in the industry?
That's a great question. One of the things that I think has helped me move along is kind of understanding what phase of my quote unquote career I needed to be in. And I always felt like I was in these phases of either learning or mastering. And so as I took on certain jobs or roles or something like that, I would really kind of come to terms with myself and be like, now is the time for me to be a learner. And that's a very different mindset than being in a phase of like, now is my time to master, right? And so I mean, naturally it went from more learning to master. But I'd probably say I had a solid 3 or 4 years where I was almost a 50-50 of like, I do need to be learning this, but I'm really starting to master this and I want to hone in on it. But at the same time, I need to have a level of vulnerability to learn this. Those were the hardest phases for sure, but I probably learned the most. You know, they were clunky, but they were good. And, you know, now I'm coming to a phase where I'm really feeling like I'm really mastering what wholesale business looks like. But I have also come to terms that I'm in that learner phase of what some marketing looks like, what a small business looks like, kind of all these other facets to it. So that to me, I think has been really helpful, and it's prevented me from having some of those struggles of feeling when I was stuck or I didn't really know where to go. I kind of came to terms of like, hey, this is a learning phase. So it's meant to be a little messy, you know, or I'm in a mastering phase. So it's okay if I'm a little, I'm not going to say bored right now, but underwhelmed, or, you know, I need to take advantage of, maybe this is a good time for me to work on my personal life, other things like that. And it was that consciousness.
Have you always been that aware of your journey?
No, probably came closer when I was like in my mid-20s, a little bit later. I mean, I definitely had, I think, the classic, like, you know, antsy barista of like, okay, 6 months, ready to go. What's the next thing? Well, okay, right. You know, and I had that, and I did it, and yeah, and like anyone is going through it, I hear you out. You know what I mean? And like, look, if you have the ability to hop from different places, you're in that place, like, more kudos to you. And sometimes it's okay to come to terms that you're like, you're really ready to move on.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing. But yeah, so it didn't come out till a little bit later. And so probably my mid to late 20s was when I started to kind of more coming to terms of like, let me understand where I'm at professionally. And, you know, what can I accept at this moment and at this time.
Was it always apparent to you that you wanted to have a career in coffee? Because you didn't study coffee. Like you yeah, like all of us. You did a degree and you're like, I kind of like this coffee thing.
Yeah, that was very much how it went. No, but I probably would say I took a pretty like big step when I was about to kind of move out of the retail stores and move into more of a wholesale position. I remember speaking with the guy who was hiring me at the time. And I remember just telling him straight up, I was like, look, you're either going to give me this job or I'm just going to leave coffee in general. And I would have gone into education. I was much more looking, I have a lot of experience working with kids and education routes. So I was more going to go for that. And I was kind of like, you got to give me this job or I'm leaving. It's time for me to go, because either I got to make a career out of this, but I'm not going to keep going in the stores. Which more power to anyone who wants to stay in retail. It was just not for me. I knew it. I was capping out. I was like, I have to leave. This is no longer providing me joy. So you can guess how the story went.
Sorry to cut you off there. You get to a point you're like, I think if I stay here any longer, I'm going to hate people. And
definitely where I was at. Yeah. And I would have felt bad for the other people. I'm like, you're not paying for my shitty service, but you're getting it. I'm so sorry.
I just feel you so much on that. I'm like, there are so many people right now who are so COVID exhausted that are like, man, I totally feel Tarra on that.
It could be a lot. And like, honestly, I look at people who are in the stores and I'm like, bless you all. Your patience is amazing. You know, your spirit is amazing. And it just like wasn't for me. And I just came to this point where I was like, this isn't fair for anybody. So, you know, it was like time for me to go. And that was it. And lo and behold, I got the job and was like, all right, we're doing this. And, you know, there was kind of multiple things that I said. There was like 4 T's that I really cared about in my life. It was tasting amazing coffee, teaching, traveling, and I totally forgot what the last one was. I had it a second, but those were kind of the main 3. Like I wanted to do those 3 things. And I think like talk to people and connect.
Okay.
And coffee allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
It was so cool. And so I was like, you know what, in the long run, I'm fulfilling a lot of these major things that were very important to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what did you study?
I ended up studying women's studies at the University of Riverside. I like to more say feminist studies because, in my opinion, women's studies is the study of women, when feminist studies is the study of women in conjunction with men, which I think is very important. Yeah, I wasn't going to negotiate with the school on that one, but yeah, so yeah.
You knew what you were there for.
On. Yeah, exactly. So I finished my degree in that.
I have a particular appreciation for what you studied. Obviously, I asked the question knowing that you had studied that. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart in this industry. Because when I started in this industry 20 years ago, it was spot the female barista. It was very difficult to find females in the coffee industry here in Sydney. And I found it was a little less that way when I was working in the US. It was very much that way when I was working in the UK. But we have so many challenges as women. And I hate to say this, but, well, I don't hate to say this. I just feel weird about saying it because of the fact that it still exists. But as women of colour, existing in an industry that just has so many broken bits about it, and disparaging little, like just lots of little dark places across the value chain that really don't empower women. And I wonder if we can talk a little bit about how your studies, or if at all, your studies gave you insight into the industry that surprised you about the industry over your 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, well, I'll kind of back up as to what I kind of felt was a culmination of women's studies. And it was kind of the study of, both history, current events, social movements, all of these things, but through the lens of more women. So instead of reading about, what might be going on in like a refugee camp or a war zone or something like that through a major newsletter, we would read it through a blog was written by a woman, and how those perspectives really changes. And so that really led me to have a lot more of a wider or broader scope on many different things. You get a little bit more critical when you're reading things, a little bit like, oh, well, that was, like even just how certain verbs are put there, or nouns are put there, or what's, capitalized or what's not. These small things add up to what could be a different lens, right? So that has been super interesting. I think it hasn't come into play when I look at kind of more my interactions or how things work. It more comes into play when I see a broader, like a scope of things happening, right? So for example, when we talk about how a very small percentage of, women are landowners in many of these coffee growing countries. Let's take a look at that, right? It's never just like, oh, because of this. And what I think my women's studies has come to have me be much more critical about is a lot of the time it's like, oh, well, it's due to machismo. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people I've had say, oh, it's because of this, like this one blanket answer of like, oh, because of that. And it's like, okay, well, let's back up a second. Yeah, I've definitely had that answer before, and I thought that was kind of a stunted answer. There's actually so many different facets to it, and you have to look at different lens, right? And then I think the most critical thing that I've learned is reality is we're not in that situation. No matter what, we're always going to have that third party perspective on it. So, right, regardless of the situation, we'll always have kind of a tilted skew. And it's not to become less convicted about situations. It's not to care less about them. It's to acknowledge your privilege that you're not in that situation. And if you are in that situation, then yes, you do have the privilege to speak from firsthand. But if you're not, there's always a little bit of that skew, right? And so how can you take a much more interdisciplinary approach to looking at it? I think that's been the biggest thing that I've had from that.
Clearly, you're not articulate at all on the subject. This is why I love our conversations, Tarra. So that's stuff that you are removed from, the example that you gave there. I have noticed that there are examples. For example, I had the fabulous Andrea Allen on this podcast, and we talked about what it was like for women to compete at, in regionals, in Barista Comp and Brewers Cup and Roasters Comp and all the competitions around the world. In regional competitions, national competitions, and at the Worlds. And obviously, Andrea hasn't gotten to the Worlds yet, but she is the national champ for barista for whenever the last competition was. And it took her, I think, 7 attempts to get there. Yeah. And one thing that she kept saying to me was, I want to keep finding out. I want to keep figuring out how we can encourage more women into competition. Mm-hmm. And when we kind of dug deeper into that, there are a lot more issues than what was anticipated about why women they may compete once, but what they're not realizing is that in order to get to the levels of the kinds of things that they want to achieve, it requires repeated action. From what you've observed in the wider industry, what are the kinds of things that you can see are some ways that we could start the conversation or create a greater, a deeper conversation about encouraging more women to do these harder things and have the confidence to do that? Is there anything from what you've noticed that could encourage that to become more people's reality?
That's a great question. I can't speak too much to competition because I haven't done it myself, but I can speak to wanting to dive into whether it be a little bit more of a public light in the coffee industry, whether you want to take kind of the next step and go into a higher, a different career in coffee. And so, I kind of believe in the idea of that the pendulum swings, right? Mm-hmm. So right now we're in the phase where, I think we do ultimately have to be very pro women, pro female, you're going towards that. And it's whether we do just competitions for women or something like that, just to help gain that confidence, but with the full intention of bringing it back. So we don't have to, right? I don't believe in the idea of female chefs, female sports, especially when it comes to U.S. soccer. All of these stuff, female engineer. We don't. The ultimate goal is not to get to that point. It doesn't have to be pointed out, right? I mean, Serena Williams is the biggest example of this, where she is not the greatest player. Female. Yeah, she's not the greatest female athlete. She is just simply the greatest athlete. There is no doubt about it. But right now, and this is taking away from the sports area, but right now in coffee, maybe we need to have a little bit more of, I don't want to say these safer spaces, but these safer places where women can encourage each other to move forward, to try these different things. Let's get our feet wet a lot more and kind of learning about these things and making it a safe space. And with, again, the intention to bring it back to simply, we see equal amounts of men and women competing in competition, right? Or equal just amounts of people competing in this competition. So I think right now we're kind of still in that phase. I think it's many other industries might be in this as well. But it's we kind of got to give a little extra attention, a little extra to gain that confidence. And then that idea is we come back. Because again, we don't want just female competitors. No. Right? It's here's the female competitor. That's not important. It's who that competitor is.
What do you say to the people who are who would say, well, then if we don't want to have this word female ahead of everything and make it such a big deal that this is a woman or a female that's won this, then just stop focusing on it and just get about the business of doing it. Because I hear a lot of that.
Yeah. I definitely think that's the end goal. I think what they're aiming for is like, yes, I 100% agree with you. Let's get to that point. But I just kind of think like slashing and kind of just being like, just pushing it forward, maybe could work in certain ways, but I think so far doing it, we haven't seen the results of that, you know, and whatnot. And again, like I haven't seen, competition isn't something I can speak to, but what I can really speak to is like women sales reps, right? Particularly women sales reps in equipment, where we don't see a lot of women who are equipment representatives, right? It's a pretty male dominated industry. So I have had the benefit of working alongside some really amazing women representatives who are also in sales, who've been in specialty coffee for a long time. And I was able to have my own kind of individual time with them to kind of learn about their struggles, what they've gone through. And I think it was important I had that safe space. I think it was important I had that. I do that to fuel myself getting back in the game that is being played, right? Like we're going to play the game.
Yeah.
We're all in this game, but like sometimes I got to take a side step to like do what I need to do to fuel myself up or get myself to that point. Do I wish we all had that automatic confidence, or I had that automatic confidence to go in there? Sure. Of course I do. But you know what? That's just not the case. So I think it's like, regardless of what space you think you might need, we're all aiming for the same thing. They're just different tactics of getting there. Right. So if you believe just let's cut it out, call it a day, let's move forward, awesome. If you believe in a different way, awesome. I'm sure there's even more.
I'm big on empowering our industry with assertiveness training. Simply because I think that if we can all be operating under the same rules of engagement, clear communication, not aggressive communication, not passive communication, this idea of having boundaries and respecting each other's boundaries, not letting people walk all over your own boundaries. And if we can empower an industry that operates on that kind of communication strategy that's respectful and fair and open and clear and concise, excuse me, all of a sudden, we're on a more even playing field. We're not using these intimidation tactics to try and undercut each other. But I was having a conversation with an attorney friend of mine the other day, and she said, we've got to figure out how as women we keep the door open for each other, not just open the door for ourselves. And it's not just women that need to do it. We need to be opening the door and keeping it open for just each other in general, no matter what the gender is, but particularly women doing it for other women. There seems to be this strange thing that I notice in coffee, and I'm fortunate to not have witnessed it too much in my own life, but I do witness it between women and other women, whereby they're so worried that if they keep the door open for another woman, they will somehow end up with less themselves. There's only enough room for a certain amount of women in the room. And it's like, but no, there's enough room for all the capable people in the room.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it's not talent that's keeping people out of the room, it's confidence. It's communication skills. It's a lack of self-worth, all those kinds of things. And if we can encourage people to perhaps encourage each other while not stifling their own progress. You know, there's no reason why you can't aim to be at the absolute pinnacle of your career while also mentoring other people and you know, ushering opportunities for other people at the same time. That's how we end up with an industry that continues to keep elevating, not just a couple of people rise to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, I think back a lot of the time, kind of my philosophy when I'm training people or anything like that, it's like the best compliment you could give me is to want to take my job and do it better than me.
Word.
Like, I hope you do better than me.
Word.
I hope you put what I just did was like, oh, that was old school. We're moving forward here. Like, that to me is truly like, that's the best mentality you can have, you know, and there is so much space. There is so much space, and there's so much room for so many people to grow and thrive and find what really works for them. And I completely agree with you. There's absolutely space for you to really, be a pillar and a leader in the community, to be mastering what you're really doing, but helping other people along the way, right?
Yeah.
And one of the most interesting things I recall learning in my women's studies major, and it was actually not even from a professor, it was from another student who I was with, and she goes, empowerment doesn't come down to you empowering me. You don't give me empower. Mm-hmm. I come up with myself. You just help me get there. And it was like, okay, understand this. It really throws the cap off. It just makes it so much more in perspective. And so I feel very good intentions with people when they're like, I want to empower you to do this, or I want to empower you. It's like, what I actually need you to say is, I want to help make the space for you to empower yourself. And here's the thing, it could come down to mentorship. It could come down to verbal, I'm trying to think of the right word here. Thank you. Yeah. Like applause and accolades, things like that. It could come down to just simply providing encouragement for someone to do it. Totally. And some people actually need not like the total opposite, but some people need a little bit of like a kick in the butt of like, okay, hey, that's time for you to move and go on. And so there's so much. And I think part of being a really great trainer or mentor is, you can't have one style of it. You have to learn what that person needs and help to provide that space for them. And then that's how you help them grow.
Having heard you articulate all that, I've got to ask you, what's your relationship with the word, excuse me, what's your relationship with the word positivity?
I would probably say, I see it in a pretty lighthearted way. I think positivity is pretty wonderful. I think like everyone pretty rudimentary wants some positive words, right? And it's like a small thing. And I'll be frank, I was not someone who gave a lot of like compliments when I was younger. They were like kind of few and far between. And it became one of those things where I started realizing how much of an influence they could make on someone. And I'm not being disgenuine. Like I'm being very real when I give them out. But I realized like just those words of positivity can be so incredibly meaningful for people. And I think everyone probably has a couple of examples in their life where somebody said something to them and it meant so much in the right way, in the best way.
Yeah. That moment when somebody just turns around and says, you know what, thanks for just being you. Like it really helped me. I used to love it when at the end of a shift, someone who I was working with was saying, that was a really great shift that we had together. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm. No.
It makes you feel awesome.
It does.
It makes you feel like, oh, I had a positive impact today. The reason I ask you that question about your relationship with the word positive, I was talking with one of my clients yesterday about the role of rah-rah positiveness. You know what I mean by that? Like the dessert for dinner kind of positive, where it's just all about, you got this and you'll be fine and everything will be great and don't worry, just keep trying and eventually you'll get there. And I have a real disdain for that kind of rah-rah positiveness because it's bullshit. And, just because you try at something, it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful at it. But you're damn well going to have a better chance at being successful at it. Mm-hmm. And so you don't strike me as a rah-rah positive kind of person at all. You strike me as a real talker, a respectful real talker who has a healthy relationship with the idea of positivity. Would you agree with that?
I definitely try to be. I definitely try. I mean, when I do teach other trainers how to train, and one of the things I teach on is the idea of exactly compliments and positivity and encouraging it. Because, people are learning coffee and it's not like it's close to anything you've ever done before. So there's very little analogy that you could make it similar to. And so one of the things we talk about is, don't be dishonest. Don't be like, great job when it wasn't. You can
That's
say,
what I'm talking about.
But you know what you can say? Thank you for trying. I appreciate that you went for it. Let's keep going. You don't have to have this be like, oh my gosh, you're doing great, keep going. And they're not. You can say, I am like, you just went for it. That is awesome. Didn't work out, but that's okay. That's not being dishonest. That's being very real in that, like, and it's not quite a compliment, but it is a form of positivity that acknowledges the situation, but allows you to move forward. That's the important thing. You got to move forward, because what's the point of training if that's just like learn, move. No way. It's, you know, the way that I actually see training is we're not learning skills, we're gaining confidence in an area. Like we're gaining confidence in, absolutely. And that's more important. So to me, I think it's really important that, I'm definitely not personally like, oh my gosh, you're doing so good, way to go, blah, blah, blah. It's more, I want to acknowledge that you put in that work. No,
it's
I'm
like
not.
Panda hands. For anyone who's listening and not watching, Tara's got these amazing panda hands going, go you.
Speak of panda, I got a little one right here from my niece.
Of course you do. So I guess
daily inspiration.
The part of that that's really troubling me about this in the industry at the moment, and we've talked about this in our mastermind groups, is the lack of clarity that comes around opening a cafe, and the kind of, there's this veiled positivity that seems to be going on. And I don't know if it's us podcasters that are the main culprits of this, or if it's coffee consultants that are the culprits of this, or what it is. But there's definitely something out there that I'm trying to understand about this incessant encouragement that we have of people to just go ahead and give something and go blindly. And I'm a big believer in absolutely do hard stuff. I want everyone to do hard stuff. It's like the best kind of way of becoming better at anything. Go do anything that's hard. Opening a cafe is very fucking hard. And I think the challenge is doing it knowing what's ahead and understanding that the rewards ahead perhaps are a little left of center or right of center or whatever you want to call it, but they're different than what your expectations may have been set as. And so if somebody's feeding you this kind of idea of, look, there's like 60% profit margins in coffee, and you know, you get to socialize all day and it's super easy and it's all cutesy and you get to make these muffins and, you know, all this kind of amazing stuff. And there is so much amazing stuff to be done by owning a cafe. I had a conversation at an event last night, and somebody said to me, look, I know that my profit margins are terrible, but I get to pour, I get to inject a little bit of love into everybody's day, every day.
Yeah.
And I was excited by that and terrified by it all at the same time. Because this is a person who's had a cafe for a few months, and they're becoming aware that their profit margins are near on non-existent. But it's enough for them to, you know, sell cups of love every day. So I love that. I love that that there's this opportunity for this person to make people's days better. I really do. It's why I want to pick up a shift a week in a cafe, because I want to be reconnected to that kind of thing again. I miss that. I haven't been in a cafe for 6 years, like worked in a cafe for 6 years. And it is the thing that I think will help me reconnect with being back in Sydney. But we have this disconnect where when profit margins are so razor thin, if selling cups of love is enough, then you need to understand that you're probably just going to be a pop-up. Because there's got to be an end of a lifespan for that business. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's definitely sorry, I'll let you go.
As someone who you work in, can we mention where you work?
Oh, yes.
You work at Provision, and your position there is as wholesale or as
Yeah.
ops? Wholesale.
Yep.
And I mean, you also like looking at becoming a consultant in the coffee industry and having had all the knowledge that you've had, looking at the way that people approach coming into the industry, particularly now in a COVID era. I refuse to call it a post-COVID era, as most people are calling it now. But in a COVID era where people are finding that they want to transition careers, and I'm just going to open a cafe.
Mm-hmm.
Have you at any point, are you now, whatever, alarmed by some of the, or concerned by some of the kind of lack of understanding of exactly what's involved coming into cafe ownership or business ownership in the coffee industry?
Definitely. Yeah, there's, I've definitely dealt with a good handful of people who have come in looking for very different things. They're looking for that nostalgia, right? I think a lot of people have this like, oh, I had there was this coffee shop I went to when I was in college. It was so great. We had, open mic night and I gathered with my friends and like, I'm so happy you had that. I'm so happy you had that. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, you are opening a business and you are actually opening something that's going to be a lot closer to a restaurant than you are to what would be a coffee shop. Unless you have 200 square feet and like two people who can work it, you're really opening something that's got to have a lot more to it, right? And so, let me put it this way. When I do see people who want to go in because they want to build community, because they want to create a welcoming and open space, I mean, that to me is at least definitely 1 foot like in the right direction, right? I would rather have that than someone who's like, I'm here to make business or like make money. That's it, right? It's like, oof, okay, well, that's you're going to be pretty disappointed pretty quick. But I think the healthiest people, that's just like not going to work out. Let me know.
Well, because most people think there's like I said, 60% profit in coffee.
Yeah, that's just like, that's not going to happen. No. And I think so a really good, healthy mindset is one of both. One of, I want to engage with my community. I want to, provide a wonderful, welcoming space. You know what I mean? I want to provide some great products, something that's going to be one half. And the other half of it is I want to own a successful business kind of / restaurant. Because if you have one or too much of one or the other, you're going to be disappointed no matter what. If you're kind of saying this like, oh, it's going to be so fanciful and I'm going to have this, it's like, oh man, when you realize that you haven't taken a day off in at least the first 6 months, that's going to come hitting you hard and fast.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah.
At least the first year. At least the first year.
At least, yeah. Most of the time I'm like, look, you'll probably take a day off in maybe 8 months. That's totally what it's going to, unless you actually want to close for a day, which if you're starting to open, I don't suggest you do. Like that first year, you should be open.
That's the rah-rah positive shit that I was talking about that it really concerns me. These people who aren't prepared for the reality of what's coming. And because they've been told, don't worry, you can, just as long as you're organized, as long as you have your ducks in a row, everything's going to be fine. You'll be able to take your time off. The number of cafe owners that I have spoken to, 3 or 4 years deep into owning a cafe and multiple cafes later because the first one wasn't making enough money. So they thought if they opened a second one, it would be more profitable because their supply chain is already set up, right? So instead of just ordering for one shop, they just order for 2 and it's much easier and their profit margins will be better because they're buying in bulk. Also, people that's nowhere near as simplistic as that sounds.
No, there's this rumor of like rule of 3. If you get to 3, it's easier. I agree. It's kind of a lie. I don't know who's putting out this rumor. Please stop. Like,
the bigger your workforce grows, the bigger the head fuck grows, which is fine if you can manage the head fuck. But you all of the sudden have more HR issues, you have more storage issues, you have more impact if there's a problem with your supply chain. There's a whole bunch of issues that come with growth and scaling that if you haven't fixed in your first business, you won't have a chance in hell of fixing it if you grow just to try and make bigger profit margins.
Yeah.
It's this idea of, people are like, but Lee, you can be really negative when it comes to this stuff. I'm like, I'm really not being negative at all. I just want you to see the reality of the situation so that you perhaps take a beat before you do this and know what you're expecting so that we can get you to the place of success a lot quicker. Because if you go in knowing that it will be so hard to get this project to day one. I'm going to get to day one and then I'm going to think, now that I know how to do this, I'm going to open my second one. That happens pretty much. I would say 80% of the people that open cafes are excited to open their next one right away because now they know how to do that. And I encourage everyone to resist that urge. Resist the urge to open the second cafe before 3 years.
Yeah, you got to at least go through. Yeah. Definitely. No, you definitely need to go through some time for sure, to just figure out what works. It's like, I almost think you need to be open that first year almost every day, including on holidays, just to you got to figure out which one's going to be busy or not. Sometimes you're busy on certain ones, sometimes you're not, I'm with you. You definitely need to go through for sure that learning curve, go through all seasons, definitely go through the very quintessential first round of hiring everybody and probably maybe 15% of people sticking around past month one. Yeah, I know. Hiring phase one, usually a little bit of the worst one, unfortunately. And so you kind of just got to go through those growing pains. And then after that, you can. And once you've done it, I agree, 2 to 3 years. And you're like, no, I really want to open another one. At that point, you're making an educated decision at that point, but it takes a while.
Yeah, it's one of those things of I often wonder, why would you do this to yourself so quickly after having just finished? Just doing the fit out is traumatic.
Yeah, it is.
The amount of disappointment that comes with it costing you twice as much as you thought it would, it taking twice as long as you thought it would, you being disappointed infinitely many more times than you thought you could be because you picked the perfect contractor and they have all the relationships that you think that you need to have and all the permits are going to come in on time and then the city comes in and says, oh, we need you to move your toilet about 3 inches.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be open till at least that's done. And you're like, you look at your contract, you're like, how did you not know that? Well, they just changed the ordinances. Things are going to go wrong and you're going to be disappointed. And this is why when I meet someone like you who has legitimately been through it, like you've legitimately had a career in all different facets of the industry, I'm like, okay, this is someone who, if they are going to be working as a consultant in the coffee industry, they are going to be able to point out blind spots that most people could never fathom. And it's important. Yeah. It's way more important than you can imagine. So it's I know that there are people who like to have the just tell me the positives. That's it. Just tell me the positives of everything. It's like, that's fine, but if you do have dessert for dinner too many times for too many years in a row, you're going to end up with diabetes. Yeah. And I'd rather that we told you what was coming so that you know what to expect and how to digest it properly. What are some of the things in your time that has led you to want to consider becoming a consultant? What are some of the things that you think that are the biggest information gaps in our industry?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, what ended up kind of being a a revelation for what I wanted to be a coffee consultant or a coffee program consultant, because as I've just learned, got to be a lot more specific, which I will be. That was my particular one. Yeah. I was like, coffee program. It kind of hit me hard. Like, it just hit me like a brick one day. I was like, I'm here, and I was working with some of our partners, and I was helping them, doing all the stuff most reps do. Let's get you the right coffee. Let's get you the right equipment. I'm gonna help you lay up the bar a little bit. Okay, let's do this on that. And then I got to this point where they were asking for help of like, how should I hire a manager? What should my opening and closing sheet look like? How can I support my labor in this way? All these different things that, I was really flattered they were coming to me on, and I'm really thankful that I could help them. But one day I was just like, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not getting paid for what was, I'm not learned, like I've learned in this job. I'm getting paid because like I put in my work ahead of time, right? And there are many sales reps in coffee who don't have previous coffee experience, who have previous sales experience. And, kudos to them. I have nothing to say, about that. But what I will say is that I do feel that I do have a huge advantage. I've been a barista. I know what it's like. It's shitty when you're just working by yourself, or like some sort of random emergency happens, or like you're slammed and you're down a person, whatever it may be. There's a level of empathy that I could really have from that experience. And so it, like I said, it just kind of hit me one day, and I was like, you know what? I am not getting paid for this. And you know what? This is really good advice. This is really good advice that I can speak to, that people can have and they can take with it. And that was kind of my like, maybe I should start to get paid for this. You know what? Like, I'm ready for that. And so that's when I kind of started diving in a little bit. And it's funny because I feel like I've actually heard some horror stories of people becoming coffee consultants of like, they tried it and it totally failed, or just like, it didn't work out. You can't pick your clients. They got involved in this project and it like closed in a year or something like that. And so I had heard of all of these, like, are you sure you should do this? Do you think it'll actually work out? Right. And I was like, I don't really know if I should do it. And then life happened, right? And, we've kind of talked about it, and I'll be transparent. It went from like, getting engaged, COVID hitting, losing my job, like boom, 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 boom. Yeah. Like things just changed very quickly for me. And so I quickly, moved from the place I'd been for the past 10 years, moved out here. And I needed time to recalibrate. And, I knew the market in Los Angeles. I knew what was needed there. I felt like I could kind of launch it then. And I was starting to go down that path. Life took a different turn, and I needed some time to think about it before I moved in. And now I'm kind of going back into it. But it's that's what kind of ultimately had me come to this point of like, you know what, this is really good advice, and it can help a lot of people. I don't want to limit people, like helping people, you know what I mean? Like, let's do this, but I don't as well want to give it away for free, because I've worked for this and I've earned, you know what I mean? Like and so that's the thing. It's like,
you really have.
Yeah. And believe me, it's hard for me to even say that. It's hard for me. I remember on our first mastermind class, our first conversation, I said that out loud of like, I want to get paid for this. And I thought to myself after our class, that sounds like I'm all about the money. That sounds like I don't care about people. And it's like, I can guarantee you probably other people didn't think about that, but that's like very much like, it was just where I was at. And so that's why. And I want to be able to help people grow.
There's a lot of strength in that vulnerability, and I appreciate you sharing that, because that's the Dunning-Kruger effect there again. The people who are most capable of executing the job feel like they shouldn't be doing the job, and the mastermind exists in order to help you step into that truth, so that we can empower you with a clear strategy moving forward, knowing what your superpower is as a consultant, just getting the clarity around that. You've evolved in just a few sessions from somebody who I could see that when you said that, there was a little bit of like shyness. If you go back and watch the video, when you say it, you kind of retract a little bit.
I can believe it. Yeah.
And now that we've got the clarity around like what kind of consultant in the coffee industry you want to be, the confidence just comes out in you. It's like it was like this new, all right, actually that is what I'm good at. That is what I can offer the industry. And okay, now let's go into the planning phase of everything. And the reason for anybody who's listening to this, who is considering becoming a consultant in the coffee industry and has had bad experiences at it, the secret sauce is figuring out what your superpower is. You can't be a consultant in coffee, in everything in coffee. I have never roasted a batch of coffee in my life. There is no reason for me to be a consultant in coffee roasting. I wouldn't know how to do it. But Ann Cooper is a master at it. And so she runs our mastermind groups around that. You, my dear, have this wealth of knowledge in operations in a cafe, in wholesale, in how to put together a menu, how to approach intelligently all of these aspects around the cafe sales experience. And the comical part about it is you feel guilty about imparting that knowledge in a value exchange with someone who really needs your knowledge so that they can be successful. And so this is why we started the Coffee Consultants Mastermind Group, is because in coffee we seem to have this guilt around success. It's weird. If we're good at something, we feel guilty about a value exchange around it. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, how can we empower people who do have the necessary skills to teach in this niche or niche, wherever you're from and say it. How do we empower you to go find the customers that need what you've got? Because there are many, many people who just hiring Tarra for even a couple of months of monthly coaching will end up conspiring to their own success much, much quicker than having not had you. And that was why it was like a breath of fresh air when I met you and heard that you were going to be forging this path ahead as a consultant. I'm like, okay, this is somebody who I want to tell people about. This is somebody who I want other people to aspire. And I'm sorry if this makes you feel uncomfortable, but this is somebody who I want other professionals to want to aspire to be like. Because you've put in the work, you've stuck it through, and you've earned the opportunity, I guess, to leverage your experience and your expertise to help other people be successful. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I appreciate you saying that.
No worries. What do you get excited about knowing that, because I guess you're going into you were talking about I go through a learning phase and then I go through a mastering phase. And I guess even though you've mastered the skills of what you want to teach about through your consulting and help people empower them with for their businesses with, what is the learning part that's coming for you?
Oh, definitely. I think the biggest learning part for me is, I'm having to put 2 feet in, and I've this whole time kind of had the more the nostalgia, right? Oh, great. I'm going to help people. I'm going to do this. I got to run a business. I got to learn how to make sure I write this down for taxes. I need to learn, how do I write off this desk?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So things like that. How do I get my marketing up and running? How do I, just like learning about that. So that is really the learning phase that I'm kind of going through. And, it's funny because I can speak so much to that business essence, the numbers, the hard, the nitty gritty stuff when it comes to cafe. And then I talk about it in my own business and I'm like, oh, that's right. I need to write that down. Like I have to, I'm kind of learning that business essence myself, or is this an investment? Is it not? Different things like that. So that's definitely the learning phase that I'm for sure going through is the of owning my own business. And it's good. It's humbling.
I was just going to
It's
ask
you know what I
how you
mean?
feel about it.
Oh yeah. So I mean, I definitely have some moments where I feel a little dumbfounded. I'm like, oh, I mean, it's literally like, do I have a template for an invoice? Probably not. What is this going to look like? Like, I mean, something as simple as that, but these are little things
But
that I'm
it's
going to have to
real.
start. It is, and what type of brand I want to have for myself.
Yep.
So that's really kind of the learning, growing, icky phase that I'm going through. But I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of people who do own other small businesses, because that's so much of what coffee is, and I'm able to lean on some people for some really, really great, guidance and help and things like that, and also just like, what can I learn on my own,
It's so exciting. I mean, the fact that you're going through this now for yourself is going to uncover so many things that you didn't know you didn't know.
Absolutely, yes.
We just kind of assume that, oh, how hard can it be to put together an invoice? But there is a legal element of putting together an invoice. It becomes a legal document. Once you create it and issue it to someone, there's tax things that have to go on there. There's certain numbers that need to go on there that prove that you are an actual entity. It can be, if there's an issue in court, it can be subpoenaed in court as a legal document. Like, these are all important things to understand before you just kind of like sit there and go, well, it's just an invoice, right?
Yeah.
What has to be on an invoice? Legally, what do I need to put on there? And it's different in every state you're in, let alone which country that you're in. So, is there a way to make my invoice appear in somebody's, email that makes them want to pay it? Do people get scared when they see my invoices? Do people get excited when they see my invoices? How do people feel around all of this stuff? Again, it's just an invoice, right? But it's not just an invoice. It's an extension of your brand.
Yeah.
There's so much to think about around all of this stuff, and where do you learn about it, and who's teaching you the right stuff. And now, as you go through this process, you start to expand the scope of what you can help your clients with, which is just so fucking exciting.
It is, yeah. It's nice. It's great to see it, and like have it start to slowly but surely develop.
Have you hit that little moment of pride when you're like, oh man, that's me. That's like, I'm doing this.
Not that one. Not yet, but I definitely have a few little moments in the past where I was like, yeah, you did take that advice, didn't you? Oh yeah, that worked out for you. And it's like, I like see it where I was like, yeah, glad you decided to take that. And so, I have these moments. I was like, that feels good. That feels nice.
That's awesome. I mean, the world, our industry is, as you start to spread your wings as a consultant in the coffee industry, our industry is going to be better off for it. We're going to have people doing better because they're being encouraged and motivated, and I hesitate to use the word led, because I'm sure someone like you feels uncomfortable with that kind of word, like someone's being led by you, but they're being guided by you. Our industry will be, your clients will be better off for having been guided by you with regards to what they're doing. And that's exciting for me, because what that then means is, if they're being guided by you, they're going to be successful. They have a greater chance at success. And everything that we're trying to do in Map It Forward is all about, how do we shift the ratio more in the direction of success in regards to failure.
Yeah.
It's not about asking less people to go into business. It's about having more people that go into business be more successful, have a greater chance at success. Because at the moment, that ratio is skewed far too heavily in the direction of failure, and we need to start empowering it and moving it in the other direction. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, with regards to the kind of consulting that you want to do, What do you think are some of the challenges that are facing our industry about that? What do you think are some of the things that need to change?
That's a great question. Well, I think one of the things that I see people struggle with a lot of the time is just kind of like how continuously inventive you have to bring people in. I think there's this like idea that like if I have coffee, it will just sell. And it will not. That is the biggest lie anyone can tell you. It's like, I have the coffee, people will come. It's like, nope, not even close. Like
massively spread.
Yeah.
Load of bullshit.
Yeah. It's like, and I get it. There was a reason you walked into a coffee shop one day, right? Like maybe you didn't see the advertising, you just needed a place to study, and that's kind of it. But now there are so many options. You are not walking into, a school of fish. You're walking into a sea of sharks. So you're going to think, or you're going to, you know what I mean? Like it's one or the other.
I've never heard that. I love that. Yeah. Go on.
Yeah. You're walking into a lot harder territory. So because of that, I think one of the biggest things that people do is they don't look at activating their community in a way that is going to help to guarantee that, right? Like you want regular, you want people to come here, they want people to refer. This is why coffee shops, that's why many people go into, because that was a second home for you or a safe place. And so it's about bringing people in, it's about engaging your community. And so people look at all this other stuff of like, I'm going to be a drive-through, or I'm going to be on a corner unit, or the rent's really good here. It's like, great. How are you going to activate your community?
Yeah.
How are you going to bring them in? And it could be like, I activate my community by the reality is I'm on the way to the freeway. Okay. Right. Sounds good. How are you going to activate that community there? And it could be, I'm at this tiny little place that you can only really walk to, and it's kind of only known in the neighborhood. Awesome. How are you going to engage with people there? So, and it's not just as easy as like, or like, we'll do an open mic night, or we'll do this event. It is like people want to know, like, how are you contributing back to your community? What else are you doing? Right. And so just being involved in many different ways, I think it's really important. It's also so important that owners are involved. Owners should be in the beginning, absolutely, like, you need to be on the floor. You need to be saying hi to people. You need to be like schmoozing, saying hello, all of that stuff. Because oftentimes I see them in the background and they're like, I'll just have my young, fresh, bright barista do that. And you're like, cool, they're maybe going to last 6 months. They're probably, you know what I mean? Like if you're lucky, you're going to have a barista who's going to stay for 1 to 2 years. And like past that is, that's a unicorn. So the reality is, like, you need to be an owner and you need to be there with your customers. And that's so important. That to me is a big thing that people don't do enough.
What do you say to people who are like, but I could make more money doing other things? The most value, and I hear this a lot, the greatest value of my time is not spent behind a coffee machine as an owner.
That's okay. So that is a fair statement. You have to do, especially as a small business owner. Yeah, you need to be doing marketing. You need to be, doing like paying bills. You need to be doing this other stuff. And I'm not always pro owners, being a barista themselves. You should definitely know everything that your baristas go through, so you have a level of empathy. And if you ever need to cover a shift, you should be able to do that.
Word.
But and on top of like, hey, there's someone who can have that job. Right? Your job is running this coffee shop. Let someone have this job. So there's that. It's more about having a level of empathy and understanding what your staff are going through. There are very important facets to going behind the scenes and running all of that. So yes, you got to do it. And you are going to make sure that things are stable and consistent by doing that. But the way that I kind of see is that's just going to keep your business going, right? It's going to keep it consistent. When you're reaching out to your community, when you're engaging with them, when you're now growing, right? There's a big difference between keeping things steady versus putting in some face time and some emotional time to help grow your business, right? Because that can go as wide as you want it to be, right? That doesn't have a cap on growth. So I think it's got to be a healthy balance between the two.
I encourage all owners to do one shift every week behind the bar.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Or on the floor or at the register. If only to make sure that their staff know that they can be in the trenches with them.
Yeah.
I mean, being an owner is such a delicate balance between running the business and being in the business. And while it's important for you as an owner to be working on the business the majority of the time, no longer being working in the business creates a distance between you and your staff and you and your customers. And a big part of becoming a small business owner is, how do I create a flow or a hum that is constant? And if then there needs to be constant faces that people get excited about seeing in a business, like you were referring to. And sometimes it's, you know, different business owners have strategies around that. I worked for somebody once who had said to me, this was so formative in my career. As baristas, we were not allowed to speak to the customers.
I've never heard what?
Yeah. Wow. Dude, this is like a mind fuck what I'm about to tell you. So, and at the time it was one of the most famous cafes in Sydney. And we're going back around 15 years here. And we were doing astronomical amounts of espresso-based drinks, like in the order of between, on a slow day, it was 1,000 base espresso drinks a day. On a good day, it was about 2,000 espresso-based drinks a day. And 3 baristas, and like there was no food service. We had pastries. You served yourself with the pastries, and that was it. Like, it was I remember taking my mum there once on one of my days off, and I'm like so proud, so excited, and I'm like, isn't this awesome? And she's like, if I'm being honest with you, I feel like I'm in a stable eating at the animals drinking trough.
Oh my goodness. Here's your hair barrel. Oh my goodness.
I'm like, that's not what you were supposed to say. She said, Lee, that's what it feels like. But we were not allowed to speak to the customers, and we were not allowed to speak to each other. And you were literally in like a 3 feet kind of area is what your moving distance was the whole shift. You did not move at all, other than to grab things from behind you and in front of you. Anyway, so somebody pulled me aside after I'd been working there for a significant period of time and said to me, so listen, you could be one of the most talented baristas I've ever met, but we have a problem. You have too much personality for this job. There are 2 kinds of baristas. There's the kind of barista that when a customer comes in, they're excited about coming into this shop because that barista's there. And then there's the kind of barista that works here, and they are nameless and pretty much faceless to the customer. So you have to decide which kind of barista you want to be. The look of horror on your face, Tarra, is awesome.
I'm like, it's like, that's very like utilitarian, too much to the max. Like,
right. And this idea really damaged me because it was at the really formative part of who I was as a barista and how I was learning how to be a barista. And it was all very militant. There were only certain kinds of things we could say to each other. We were not allowed to smile at customers or make eye contact and now I know how damaging that was, but it was right at the beginning of what specialty coffee was becoming in Sydney. And most people, when they tried to get we were always hiring, and rarely anyone made it past the first couple of hours of a trial shift. Rarely. Wow. Of the hundreds of people that I saw trial at that place, rarely anyone ended up becoming somebody who got hired. And look, I learned so much from that job. Loads of really great things about making coffee and loads of things that broke my spirit, and really formed some terrible habits about the way that I led people back in those times when I then went on to work in other places, and what I then expected of baristas that worked under me, or like puppy baristas that would come in. And I was taught by a system that was utilitarian, as you said. And I thought that that's the way that you were supposed to create the best baristas, because everybody wanted to be a barista at that place, and everyone hated the fact that they couldn't get it because they didn't have what it took. So there was this weird kind of dysfunction of, I hate working in this place because I'm being really badly treated.
Yeah.
But I also didn't know how to check my ego, because walking around with the t-shirt on of being an employee at that place, people near on like bowed at you when you were walking in the streets in that neighborhood. It was mental. It was mental. And other baristas would come in and like, as they walked in, they were like bowing down at the espresso machine was some kind of weird altar. And you look at that and you think, man, this is so fucked. It's so fucked because customers loved coming to this place. People bought houses to be close to this cafe.
Right. The best. Okay.
People bought houses so that they could live close to this cafe.
And so was it all about the product? Is that what made it so successful?
The era of the time was that specialty coffee was, at the time the coffee was out of this world, better than anywhere else. It really was. And it was so consistent as the consumer, because we had to throw out anything that was less than perfect. So the waste was out of, if your Rosetta wasn't perfect, anyone who's in Sydney is going to know who I'm talking about now. But if your Rosetta was less than perfect, you threw the whole thing out. And so when people say like a harsh culture doesn't work, I'm like, it did then. But it won't now. That was a different time. And it really informed my like anti-elitist approach to anything. Now I have such a big problem with elitism in coffee. I have a problem, and that's not helpful either, to have this anti-elitist kind of, shouldn't be anti anything in my opinion, but I have a real problem with people who feel that they're gatekeepers of any kind of information, or gatekeepers of what's cool and what you should like and what you shouldn't like, and how you should treat people and how you shouldn't treat people and all that kind of shit. It's one of these things of, I feel that we know when dysfunction exists. We've got to try and stamp that out. And when an employer is making themselves above everybody, they're not going to get any respect from their team.
No. Yeah.
And we see a lot of it in our industry.
Yeah.
And you end up with this kind of weird resentment from owners who it isn't, when they come into this and no one's warned them about how hard this is going to be. And they're like, nobody told me it was going to be this hard. Why the fuck am I standing behind the machine?
Yeah.
And this is where I'm encouraged by people like you who are going into this, because you do get the opportunity to now encourage people to manage their expectations and help them understand that.
Yeah. I definitely try to.
Change. Huh?
I said I definitely try to.
Do you see any barriers to entry moving forward for you in actually, let me ask you something else instead. Do you want to have a certain kind of message or mission or something that you want to inject into the lives of your clients as you start to create this small business as a consultant?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't say that there is like one big thing that I'd want to. I like the idea of doing a lot of small little things that slowly but surely add up.
Like what?
So I don't think I could do kind of just like, hey, here's the secret. You're now going to work on the shift, or like you're going to do this. Now it's kind of like it's small little things, but those are the things that's going to add up, right? And kind of slowly but surely. So I'm definitely a big believer in like these small, tiny things, but do the best that you can in each one of them. You know what I mean? Like do each one, and then together they will add up to be the culmination of your success, right? Of what adds up to being what is your cafe. So I think for me, that's kind of more the little things on that one. So I don't think I could ever be on a call with someone and it's like, oh yeah, I can tell you right now what your problem is. It's kind of like, I can maybe see some major points, but like, let's look at multiple other things. And I mean, that's kind of coming back to that women's studies thing, right? There's not one narrative.
Exactly.
That's the reality. There is not one narrative. There's the danger of a single story. And so you have to look at all of these different things that are adding to this and having different perspectives on it. And so hopefully I can help people by looking at multiple different perspectives. Let's take yours because you're in it. Let's take mine because I'm outside of it. Let's talk to your staff, right? Because they're in it. They're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? And so there's multiple different perspectives. We can do that. And small changes are what's going to add up to get to there. I think that would be it.
Yeah, wow. Because it could be argued that, and there are people that argue that, the place that I'm referring to has become a multi-million-dollar per month revenue generating business. And so being an asshole to your staff can get you successful in rabbits, right? You know what I mean? Like there's that argument that you can be ruthless, you can treat people like shit, you can create this air of elitism because, hey, that's a highly consumable commodity now, this idea of elitism. It gets you subscribers, it gets you customers, it gets you likes. When people want to aspire to be like you and they know they can't, that's a very attractive kind of thing. And it works. It's proven again and again and increasingly it's proven to be like that. I think the world's going to start to challenge some of those ideologies as we move forward. Time will tell. But you're right, there's this idea of if you're just going to take the perspective of no, we've all got to be ultra woke and that's the only thing that's going to work moving forward, and let's hold hands and sing kumbaya and let's try and fix the coffee supply chain and then we'll be successful. There is a different perspective on what that could look like. And I think it's going to be a very fucking interesting time in the coffee industry over the next 10 years to see what happens with all the things we've kicked down the road. Things like climate shifting, things like the way we treat people and staff and wages and employee rights and, the coffee price crisis that's going. There's so many things that have been kicked down the road. And now all of those things, the road's ending. Can't kick it down the curb anymore.
Yeah.
And now we're going to have to start to pay the piper with regards to, all right, so a whole lot of things that have been too difficult to deal with are, they're coming due now. So we've got to figure out how we address them. How have you found it, to pivot a little bit here, how have you found it moving from one coffee culture to another coffee culture?
It's a great question. Yeah, definitely. Kind of coming back to like I'd have that kind of learning phase where I'd kind of learn what what are the tenets to this company? What do they really care about? You know, and kind of having to absorb that. And, you know, for me, it was kind of like what comes down to the tenets, you know what I mean? So I did work with a company, I won't say the name, but they were very tied to like kind of skate and surf culture, for which I do neither, like at all, like no influence. Like there was that, it was, you know, very beach oriented. It was like, I'll live near the beach. Like I just didn't have these kind of, like, you know, there was kind of these facets to the company that was very important.
What part of LA are you from?
I'm from, oh boy, it depends. The last 10 years, I was more in the East LA part.
Okay.
Yeah. So not near the beach.
Not near the beach.
Not near the beach. We're not all next to the beach. I know many think so, but
no, not me. I've lived in LA, so
yeah, I was like, this is a 2-hour
well
trip,
aware.
depending on what time of day you leave. So, you know, I didn't have that, and that was kind of. I actually remember someone had told me, they're like, you know, we really want to find, you know, the blank. They put the company in you. We need, you know, you got to get a little bit of that, and it was literally like, what? And I kind of had this moment where I was like, but I'm me with like that essence of that, you know? And so what I really found was like, okay, well, at the end of the day, what are the tenets that I really care about? What are the things? And that's what I've found as I've kind of moved between different coffee cultures is like, what are the tenets that I really still believe in, right? I believe in the tenets of like having a craftsmanship to the product that we're doing. I believe in sustainability immensely in regards to like what we're doing in a cafe level, wholesale level, whatever we can. You know, so these were the things that I would kind of tack onto because these were long-standing pillars to a company or a company culture that I would gravitate to. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I don't surf, I don't skate, not next to the beach. But you know what? This is what I do identify with and why I'm here. And that's kind of how I've kind of been malleably working between different ones.
And so moving to Phoenix, have you noticed any differences between the coffee cultures between Phoenix and LA?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. Definitely. You know, again, I having different perspectives where with LA, I was in it, and here I'm coming in and having a different perspective. So, you know, what I kind of found in LA a little bit more is it's a little more about like what are you bringing to the table in regards to like your drinks, your menu, your food, your seating, your furniture, like it was a lot of like this experience that I'm going for and like what are you doing? And so like I would often be going to coffee shops because I'm like, oh man, I hear they got this like awesome drink on the menu, or there's this new location, they're in this historic landmark, something like that. And so I think that was a big driving force. In the wholesale market there is very different as well than to when I came here. And what I'm finding here, and I'm actually really loving about Phoenix, and it's not that people here aren't doing amazing food, amazing marketing, amazing drinks, all of this other stuff. I am really finding that there's a lot of support. A lot of people support each other.
Yeah.
You know, and it was also the same in LA. Like some of my best friends work for competing companies. But for here, there's definitely still much more of a growing phase, I think, with Phoenix. And you know, what I'm really loving is people are really gathering here. I'm actually seeing, granted, of course, I've been here in the time of COVID, so a little bit of a different perspective, but less people just on their computers, more people talking, more people engaging.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of what I'm seeing here. It's a lot more about a neighborhoody kind of thing, you know, and it feels nice. It feels nice. That's kind of, at least so far, what I've witnessed. And I still have more to learn about this area and grow. And I'm curious to see what I'll observe a little bit more. But yeah, in regards to wholesale game, very different in regards to here. So.
In what way?
Oh, I feel like it's I'm trying to formulate my thoughts. Let's put it this way. I feel that with being in Los Angeles, it was a little bit more about like what's the best coffees you got on the table, what's all the services you offer. Just again, you're in a sea of sharks here. So it's really, really competitive. Here in Phoenix, it's definitely, you know, there's of course a level, like a healthy level of competition. But I definitely think one, being local and being from Arizona is really, really big. And that's actually something I'm loving in the cafes here, where people often are also sourcing so many things from the state.
That's
right?
awesome.
The tea, the olive oil, like whatever it may be. And I love that that's something people are really, really talking about here. Yeah. Yeah. That sense of local, supporting other community businesses. I think that's something that's very unique to this area.
They're lucky to have you.
Oh,
They're
thanks.
really lucky to have you. And I'm excited to see where this new journey goes for you because, Reen, I know how hard it can be having moved so many times and landing back in Sydney and trying to rediscover a new place, or to discover it for the first time and then rediscover it and find your place where you fit into that. It's super challenging, and it's often leaves you questioning. Some days you're like, oh, I totally fit in here. And then other days you're like, I don't know if I can bring anything that contributes to this. So, yeah, I'm excited for you. And I think that as with the way that the world is formulating how it does business moving forward, you're somebody who, while you're working at provision and you have this kind of thing that you do, contribute to the company in the day-to-day, being in person, the scope of what you want to do long-term in your career now lives on the internet.
Yeah.
Which is just so super exciting.
Don't have to go anywhere. I can stay put wherever I want to.
With your little panda sitting there.
Yes. My niece. It's a Valentine from her.
That is so sweet. Well, thank you very much for a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
If people want to get in contact with you in any way or follow you on socials, where can they find you?
Definitely. So you can find me on Instagram at a little T, so ALITTETEA.
That's so cute.
Yeah, just a little T.
Because
everyone, I'm so lovingly under 5'2", so a lot of people at my old job would just be like, little T, that's it. And I also really like tea at the time. So with that, you can also email me at my name, Tarra, TARRA.Samuelson@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll include your Instagram handle in the show notes if anybody would like to follow you on Instagram. So thanks so much, lady. It has been a wonderful conversation.
Equally, I appreciate it, Lee. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your day.